All right, Alexander, we had elections in Greece yesterday, and the result is, in my opinion, is not surprising. The party that is considered to be conservative right, New Democracy and Mitsotakis, they got something like around 41%, let's say, of the vote. The second place party, Syriza, which is considered to be a left party, they performed poorly, and they got around 20, I believe, like 21 or 22%. I don't know, something like that. They underperformed. And then you have the other parties, Basok and Kukoe and the other parties that followed. But the big story is that New Democracy outperformed, and the second place party, Syriza, did much worse than people had expected or hoped. And so it was, I guess you could say, it was a big win for the center-right party, but it wasn't enough for them to get a majority to get a strong majority in parliament. And instead of going the route of coalition, it looks like we're going to have another election in June. That's what the current Prime Minister Mitsotakis is saying. He wants to avoid a coalition, and he wants to govern with a clear majority, a clear mandate. To me, I say, center right and left party and all this. To me, they're both the same deal. They're pro-globalist, pro-EU, pro-US. Maybe one's a little bit to the right, maybe one's to the left, but at the end of the day, they're two sides to the same coin. They're both neoliberal globalist parties.
I completely agree with that.
My opinion.
I completely agree with that. The other thing I would say about New Democracy is that to some extent, it's still the old firm. You still get an awful lot of people in it who are part of the old families that used to dominate politics. One of which was mine, though we were never actually part of New Democracy, but we were on the other side. But anyway, whatever. But I mean, they have, I suppose, that legacy as well. That they're the old firm. They've been running things in Greece for a long time, and they're still running things in Greece. And as you absolutely correctly say, they're pro-American, pro-EU, pro-neoliberal, pro-globalist to the core. And of course, Syriza, the so-called party of the left, is no different. I mean, that's what I think people need to understand. I mean, it's exactly the same. And yes, you can just about understand why an establishment party, I would prefer to call New Democracy, by the way, an establishment party because of this legacy that it has, than either a right-wing party or a centre-right party or anything like that. It just is the people who run things in Greece and have always done so. That's why it's there. But you could understand why that would still be there and still getting votes and still getting elected, and because after all, they are the natural governing party, if you like, because they're the natural party of the governing class. But Syriza, which was supposed to be a left-wing insurrectionary movement, well, what's the point of it? It's going to be exactly like the establishment. So, of course, it is imploding. And by the way, that's the one good thing, as far as I'm concerned, that's come out of this election. I don't know how far it's going to go, but the sooner we see the back of Syriza, frankly, the better. It has been a complete disaster for Greece. It's meant that we, again, like every other country in the collective West, we don't have a real politics anymore. We don't have any real alternatives. And it's interesting to see how Syriza's collapsed, how the Varoufakis thing, which a lot of people were talking up outside Greece, I don't think anybody in Greece took it terribly seriously. It's failed dismally. Anybody associated with that Syriza government, that disastrous Syriza government, which is supposed to be against the Troika and the bailout, the EU bailouts and all of those things, anybody associated with it is seeing their support implode. And it's a good thing, because that kind of failure should have consequences.
Yeah, they were the worst radical left party I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
There was nothing radical or left about
No.
Syriza, that's
I
for
completely
sure.
agree. I completely
Oh
agree.
boy. So look, voter turnout was pretty low. I believe it was at like 60%. So here's my hunch as to how the Greek voters saw things. They said, these Syriza, just get them as far away from us as possible. We don't want them anywhere near government. So they delivered to them a big defeat, and they just sat there and looked at the political landscape, and they said, we might as well give it to the establishment because, what can we do? It's kind of like, either I'm just not going to vote, so I'm just not going to vote because we see the turnout numbers, or I'm just going to vote for these guys. At least they haven't destroyed the country too much, So just keep it in their hands and let's just wait for better days.
Absolutely, I think that's exactly the thinking. And bear in mind, I think you said it was at 22%. Syriza got 22% on a 60% turnout.
Something like that. Yeah.
22% on a 60% turnout. This is a country, by the way, which historically used to have very high turnouts in elections. I mean, 80+%, and where voting, by the way, was for a long time mandatory. I don't know whether it still is, but the tradition in Greece was that people voted. So people have just completely opted out. They don't believe in politics in the way that they used to anymore. And exactly as you said, they say, well, since we are not really politically engaged, 22% of 60%, it must be, well, less than 10%, or just over 10% of the electorate's now voting Syriza for the main left-wing party in Greece. That is an extraordinary change. So this might say we might as well leave things with the people who've always run things and who know how to run things. And we may not think much of them, we may not like the way they're running things, but at the end of the day, they're not going to screw up in the colossal way that Syriza did. And that's the mood. Yeah. And I think it's going to continue like that. I think it's going to continue like that. I think it's highly likely that Mitsotakis will get his majority in June, because why not? I mean, bluntly. And then we will have to do what everybody in Europe, across Europe, is doing, which is wait one day for something different. Because for the moment, what we're looking at is a political landscape that is actually more like a wilderness, a desert, because there are no real political forces of any importance or consequence in Greece.
Yeah, I think almost every country in Europe, with the exception of Hungary and Orbán, is in almost the same situation. Exactly. Let's just, as long as we don't have a government that really screws things up, like a Syriza-style government that really screws it up, then let's just stick with who we have in power, the establishment, and just wait for better days to come. Syriza, actually, I'm looking at the numbers, it's around 20%, a little over 20%. Well, so the latest count, so it's even worse than 22, yeah.
So, my final question... 20% on a 60% turnout. You go out and find Syriza voters. There are not that many of them, actually. I mean, because the turnout was so low, their percentage looks more impressive in some ways than it actually is if you consider the number of people who actually voted for them. Just so.
So my final question to you is a geopolitical one. This is good for the EU, isn't it?
Oh yeah.
I mean, this is. I mean, on the one side, the voter is saying, we're sick of all of these guys. We'll stick with the establishment, whatever. We don't particularly like them too much, but we'll stick with them and we'll wait for better days. We'll wait for new leadership. Maybe we'll get lucky and something will come up. On the other side, though, you have, the EU who's probably looking at this and saying, this is great. We get our guy in there again, even though both of the parties would have been pro-EU, but they stick with the guy that they know. The guy is super pro-European Union, super pro-NATO, super pro-Biden. They say we get a population that disengages from democracy. The EU likes that. More power to the center. A weak periphery member state. For them, this is this is the trajectory that they want. Maybe they don't
absolutely.
realize that in the future, in the long term, it's just going to lead to their collapse. But in the short term to medium term, I think this plays into their favor. This type of
Absolutely.
situation.
Absolutely, it's the experiment. I mean, it's the experiment that worked. I mean, the bailouts and all of that. I mean, they completely destroyed real politics in Greece as they used to exist, and it's left a pro-EU. In fact, not just a pro-EU, a servilely pro-EU establishment in power, which just sits there and basically follows through on any edict it gets, be it from Brussels or Berlin or Frankfurt or indeed Washington, and which is essentially unchallenged. As I said so many times, what the EU wants is weak governments in weak countries. It doesn't want strong governments in strong countries. It wants weak governments led by weak leaders who are not opposed. It wants to convert politics into something which is not politics, but is something essentially like what you used to get, in the Soviet era, where you had the apparatchiki, the people who ran things in the regions, and they weren't elected in any serious way. They went through rituals of elections, but they weren't real elections. But they were completely loyal to the Central Committee in Moscow. And that's what we've got. That's exactly where we're ending up. We are pretending that this is a democracy, but to all intents and purposes, it isn't. I mean, a democracy requires choice. There isn't one. It requires political engagement. There cannot be one. So what you have is a functionary class in Greece which runs things, and it's perhaps the most extreme and most highly developed example of this that you will find across the EU. So, as I said, from the EU's point of view, the experiment of obliterating the political system and the economy, which is what they did, has succeeded. It's achieved exactly the outcome that they wanted.
And demoralizing the people.
And demoralised the
10 years of austerity and demoralization. It works.
It works, exactly, yeah.
Yeah, and it's going to be something that they're going to carry over to other countries, or
Absolutely.
they're already in the process of carrying this over to other countries.
Absolutely.
Even Germany.
Even Germany. And of course, countries where sometimes you see flashes of what looks like resistance, like Italy. Well, we see that, they got rid of the person who looked like he might just conceivably be a problem, who was Salvini. They brought in Meloni. She was presented to the world as the alternative, except, of course, she wasn't. She's just as loyal and as subservient as everyone else. And cynicism grows, but they want cynicism because that's the only way a structure like the EU structure can survive. And by the way, Britain is no different. We're in exactly the same situation. We've discussed this in other programmes.
Worse.
We're worse in some ways. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
You said three prime ministers in 1 or 2 months. And I'm looking at Sunak now, and I'm saying, this guy may even be worse than Truss and Boris Johnson.
Yeah, well, absolutely. But I mean, he is, again, a completely loyal and reliable functionary, because that's all he is. He's not a real politician. He is a completely loyal and reliable functionary of the ruling global cabal. And if he loses the election, the person who's going to take over from him, Keir Starmer, is an equally loyal and reliable functionary of the global cabal. And that's not politics, but it's what we have.
I look at like Mitsotakis and Rutte and Poland's Morawiecki and Sunak, and they just all look like they came off of the same assembly line. They're all interchangeable. All of
Yeah.
them. I mean, I can't tell the difference between any of these guys. I really can't.
Well, of course, you're absolutely right then, because they have come off the same assembly line to all intents and purposes. I'll tell you something else. They like each other and get on with each other an awful lot more than they do with the people of the countries they govern. And that's another iron rule about these people. They're very, very remote from the people they govern. Now, I as many viewers know, my aunt was a political figure in Greece. She was a minister. And I can tell you this, she represented a constituency in Piraeus, which is the city there. She actually liked going there. She liked meeting the people. She liked going to meet the people in their, pretty tough working class area, and she did not come. She came from a privileged family, but she enjoyed it. She liked the interactions. These people don't like that. They'd like to keep as far distant as they can from the people they govern, whom they have absolutely nothing in common with at all.
Yeah. And if you get an Orban, you regime change him, or you try
Well,
to
exactly.
regime change
You
him.
try to regime change. Exactly.
Okay, any other final thoughts on the Greek election, or should we wrap it up?
I think we can wrap
don't
it
think I
up.
have-
It's a rather dismal subject, but I think we can wrap it up. But I mean, it's let me just say to
No
our
surprises.
viewers, no surprise. Exactly, you took the very words out of my mouth. It was exactly what both of us were expecting.
Yeah. Okay. TheDuran.locals.com. We are on Rumble, Odyssey, BitChute, and Telegram. And go to the Duran shop. 10% off. Use the code. Good day. Take care.